Hello Stampers! Today we're going to be doing a watercolor card that's made with vintage springtime designer series paper, rose red cardstock, and the stamp set from Happiness Shared. This card was originally done by Vicki Burdick, and I've kind of changed it up just a little bit, but we'll consider it cased. And we're going to do the little watercolor part first. I'm using two different stamp sets. I'm using Happiness Shared. We're using the flower on the stem with the little buds to go with it. I would say it's some sort of open rose because it has little buds. And then I'm using the Thinking of You stamp from the On the Grow stamp set. This is in the new springtime, summertime mini catalog, and Happiness Shared is in the original 2010-2011 catalog. So we're going to start off. I've already stamped my image with jet black StazOn ink and let it dry for a few minutes before I start watercoloring. And I'm going to be using my aqua painter. I'll be using markers, rose red, close to cocoa. You can use Daffodil Delight for the center or any yellow. I'm going to use some Pear Pizzazz and Old Olive. And the way I like to do my watercoloring is I have a piece of tile, and I just take my marker and using the brush tip, I just make a little swish on the tile like that, and then using my paper towel to dab my aqua painter, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the ink and just start coloring in my bloom. Make sure when you're watercoloring, this is just like any other watercolor, you can't have two areas that touch. If you do, they'll bleed onto each other. So make sure you don't start painting the green leaves or stems that touch the pink bloom until the pink bloom is dried. And once the one little section is dried, you can go back and do a little darker underneath to add some shading. And on this stamp, everywhere that it has the little hash marks, that means it needs to be a little bit darker. And then just color the center end with your yellow pen. It doesn't matter which one of the yellows you use. You're just going to use the very center part right there. You don't even have to use the painter for that. Just paint that part in. So get your watercolor paper, get your image stamped, and we'll start back here once you finish coloring in your design. Okay, I've got my image all colored in with my two different greens, my pink. You see I've done some shading in here, and I've gone ahead and taken the stamp from the On the Grow stamp set, the Thinking of You, and stamped it right here in the corner. Now you're going to need to trim this piece of watercolor paper. I always use my watercolor paper larger and then trim it to fit once I get it colored. And you're going to trim it down to the size to fit on the soft suede matte piece. And you're going to need to trim it down to 2 1/8 by 3 5/8. And then that will fit on your piece of soft suede. And you can go ahead and mat that. And I used just snail adhesive. Sometimes it's a little bit heavy. You might want to use something like score pal tape or sticky strip, but this should be sufficient for this with the snail. And of course I always use a little bit more snail than anybody else so that it does stay stuck till it gets where it's going. Now what I'm going to do, because this is going to lay on the card, it's going to be tied on with the rose red seam binding, I'm going to go ahead and use my slot punch, which is not in the catalog anymore. If you don't have the slot punch, you can use the 1/8 inch hole punch and just punch about 4 of them right beside each other until you get a nice little slot punched through there that your ribbon will fit through. Just like that. Okay, we'll lay that aside. Now, on your card, you have these triangles, which is, if you don't know the dimensions, it can be very trying. But what you want to do is a triangle. How about that for triangle? The distance is going to be this squared. So I have a 2 5/8 and a 2 3/8 piece of paper. I'm going to cut the cardstock from corner to corner to make my triangle. This is the matted piece, and then the designer series paper is 2 3/8, which will give us a border, and that makes our little triangles. that are perfect 45-degree angles to go right here. So you want 2 squares, 1 2 3/8 and 1 2 5/8. Alright, I've already taken my rose red piece of cardstock and cut out my top note and then run it through the dots embossing folder so that I can go ahead and have it ready to be mounted. You're going to use the Springtime Vintage Designer Series paper mounted onto Very Vanilla. And then mount your top note, and you can use just regular adhesive, or if you want to use a glue stick so you can make sure you get these little tips pushed down, you can. We're going to cover that with ribbon anyway, so it should be okay. And go ahead, and now you have your 3 pieces mounted together, because we're going to run our ribbon through here and the whole thing is going to wrap around this card. It's going to take about 13 inches of ribbon, but I'm going to use it right off the spool, and I'm going to be using my tying tool. We're not using a bow this time, it's going to be just a knot. So just layer your 2 pieces together. This is the rose red seam binding with the crochet trim, and we're just going to tie a simple knot with the 2 pieces. I slide it right off of the little tube, and I'm just going to cut it with my ribbon scissors, and I'm going to cut it about right here because it's going to be closer to one side than the other. That, and go ahead and trim my ends. Okay. Now what I want to do is feed the long end of the piece that's going to go under the artwork and around the card. I'm going to feed that from the top down through the hole. So the knot's off to the side like this. And I'm going to mount this piece of the artwork with dimensionals. And since it's going to be heavy with the bows sticking up there, I'll probably put at least 4 on there. Okay, before we mount our artwork there with our dimensionals, we're going to put our triangles on. So just go ahead and these 2 pieces will get mounted to the front here and here, and they'll go right up to the edge of the vanilla. Not the edge of the designer paper, but the edge of the actual vanilla matting. And now we're ready to mount our piece of artwork with our dimensionals that we fed our ribbon through. Alright, then turn it over, and we're going to glue down our ribbon ends. Okay. Now the whole piece is ready to be mounted to our card front of soft suede, which is a landscape fold. And once again, I'm just going to do that with regular nail adhesive. Okay, I'm going to add a few pearls from the Stampin' Up! Simple Basic Jewels, and I'm going to be using the pearls. And I'm just going to use my scissor tip here just to pick up 3 and just put them right here in a line, about a ½ inch apart. that's your finished card. Enjoy!
In the Southern Cross